Walter, stop the car! Stop the car right now! My husband hit the brakes so hard that the black duffel bag in our trunk slid forward with a heavy thud. We were 2 hours outside of Atlanta, somewhere on a lonely stretch of highway where the pine trees pressed in close on both sides. The afternoon sun was beating down, making the asphalt shimmer like water. Evelyn, what in the world? Walter's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning pale. You nearly gave me a heart attack. But I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against my chest. Because 5 minutes ago, while Walter was focused on the road, I had turned around to grab my purse from the back seat. And that's when I saw it. The black bag that our son Darnell had asked us to transport to Cousin Renee's place in Birmingham had come partially unzipped, just a few inches. Just enough for me to see what was inside. Bricks. Dozens of them, wrapped in clear plastic and duct tape. And they weren't bricks at all. Walter, my voice came out as a whisper. Get that bag out of the trunk. Right now. The look on my husband's face told me he understood. After 43 years of marriage, we didn't need many words. He saw the terror in my eyes, and his own face went gray. His hands fumbled with the door handle. We stood on the side of that empty highway, the hot wind whipping around us, staring into the open trunk. Walter reached in with trembling fingers and pulled the zipper all the way open. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We just stared at what had to be at least 50 kilograms of cocaine, maybe more, packaged up neat and professional, sitting in our 2018 Honda Accord like we were common drug runners, like we were criminals. At 72 and 70 years old, we were looking at life in prison. Oh, God, Walter whispered. Oh, sweet Jesus, what has he done to us? I felt my knees going weak. 25 years. 25 years we had sacrificed everything for our son. And this is what it came to. This is how it ended. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand how two God-fearing people who never even got a parking ticket ended up on the side of a highway with enough drugs to supply half of Alabama. My name is Evelyn Brooks, and I was born in 1953 in a small town outside of Memphis. I met Walter at Friendship Baptist Church when I was 19 years old. He was singing in the choir, and Lord help me, that man had a voice that could make angels weep. We got married 6 months later, and I've never regretted a single day with him. Well, until recently. But that's not his fault. We had 3 children, 2 daughters who grew up strong and independent, both living good lives now with their own families. And then we had Darnell, our baby boy, our son. Darnell was born in 1982, and from the moment I held him, I loved that child with everything in me. He was smart, so smart. His teachers always said he could be anything he wanted. A doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. The sky was the limit. But somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Or maybe nothing went wrong. Maybe this was always who he was, and we just loved him too much to see it. He dropped out of college after 2 years. Said it wasn't for him. Walter and I were disappointed. But we supported him. We told him he could live with us while he figured things out. A few months turned into a year. A year turned into 3. By the time he was 25, he still hadn't held down a steady job for more than 6 months. That's when he met Keisha. She was pretty and sweet-talking, and she got pregnant fast. They got married at the courthouse, and suddenly we weren't just supporting Darnell anymore. We were supporting a whole family. Mama, we need help with the rent this month, became a phrase I heard at least twice a month. Dad, the car broke down and I don't have the money to fix it. Can you watch the kids while I go to this job interview? The interview never materialized. The job never came. But we did it. Every single time, we did it. We paid the rent on their apartment. We bought groceries. We paid the electricity bill, the water bill, the phone bill. We bought school supplies for our grandchildren, Amara and Isaiah. We bought their clothes, their toys. their birthday presents. Walter had worked for 35 years at the auto plant before he retired. I had been a school secretary for 28 years. We had saved money, good money, for our retirement. We had dreams of traveling, of finally seeing places we'd only watched on TV. Hawaii, Arizona, maybe even taking a cruise. But month by month, year by year, our retirement account got smaller and smaller. "They'll get on their feet soon," Walter would say, trying to convince himself as much as me. "Darnell just needs to find the right opportunity." 25 years. That's how long we waited for that opportunity. Our daughters tried to talk to us. My sister Francine practically begged us to cut him off. "You're enabling him, Evelyn," she'd say every time we had Sunday dinner at her house. "That boy is 43 years old. He's got to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. But every time I thought about saying no, I'd picture little Amara and Isaiah. They were innocent in all this. They were 13 and 11 now, and they deserved better. I couldn't let them suffer because their father couldn't get his act together. 3 months ago, everything came to a head. Darnell called us on a Tuesday evening right in the middle of Walter's favorite show. He was talking fast, excited, like he used to when he was a little boy and had something important to share. "Mama, Dad, I've got incredible news. We found the perfect school for Isaiah. It's one of those private schools, you know, the kind where they really invest in each kid. He'll get the best education. He'll have opportunities, real opportunities. This could change his whole life." My heart lifted for just a moment. Finally, Darnell was thinking about his children's future. "That sounds wonderful, baby," I said. "How much is the tuition?" There was a pause. Too long of a pause. $55,000 for the year. I nearly dropped the phone. Walter, who was listening on speaker, sat straight up in his recliner. $55,000? Walter repeated, his voice barely controlled. "Darnell, are you out of your mind?" "Dad, I know it sounds like a lot, but think about Isaiah's future. Think about—" "No." The word came out of my mouth before I even thought about it. For the first time in 25 years, I said no to my son. Absolutely not. The silence on the other end of the line was cold. When Darnell spoke again, his voice had changed. All that excitement was gone. In its place was something hard, something bitter. "I see. So my son isn't worth it to you." "That's not fair, and you know it," Walter said, his voice rising. "We've given you everything, every single thing, for 25 years, Darnell. We've emptied our retirement account. We've put off our own needs, our own dreams. We love Isaiah. But this is too much. You need to find another way. You need to get a job, a real job." "A real job," Darnell repeated, and he laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You know what? Forget it. Forget I even asked. We'll figure it out ourselves. We don't need your help." He hung up. For 2 weeks, we didn't hear from him. No calls asking for money, no texts asking us to babysit. Nothing. The silence was somehow worse than the constant requests. Keisha finally called me one evening, her voice soft and apologetic. "Mama Evelyn, I'm sorry about all this. Darnell's been so stressed. But he wants to make things right. He wants us all to take a family trip together, like old times. Maybe go visit some relatives, spend some quality time. Would you and Daddy Walter be up for a drive to Birmingham? We could all go together. Stay at my cousin Renee's place for the weekend." Something in my gut twisted. But I ignored it. Because I missed my son. I missed my grandchildren. And maybe, just maybe, this was his way of apologizing. His way of showing us he understood. "Let me talk to Walter," I said. Walter was skeptical. "Evelyn, I don't know. Something doesn't feel right." "He's our son," I said. "He's reaching out. We can't just shut him out forever." So we agreed. Last Friday morning, Darnell showed up at our house with Keisha and the kids. Everyone was smiling. Darnell hugged me tight, tighter than he had in years. Thanks for giving us another chance, Mama, he whispered in my ear. I know I haven't been the son you deserved, but I'm going to do better. I promise. I wanted to believe him so badly. I wanted to believe that my baby boy was finally growing up. We were loading up the cars when Darnell pulled Walter aside. Hey, Dad, I've got a huge favor to ask. Renee's been holding on to some of my stuff, and she asked if we could bring it back. It's just one bag, but it's kind of heavy. Could you throw it in your trunk? Our car is packed to the ceiling with the kids' stuff. Walter looked at me. I shrugged. What was one bag? Sure, son, Walter said. No problem. Darnell carried a black duffel bag from his car to ours. It looked heavy, but not suspiciously so. Thanks, Dad. You're the best. He zipped it up tight and closed our trunk. We followed their car out of our driveway, heading toward Birmingham. The first hour was peaceful. Walter and I talked about maybe stopping for lunch at that barbecue place we liked. We talked about how good it was to see the grandkids. We talked about how maybe, finally, things were turning around. Then I turned around to grab my purse, and I saw the bag. The zipper had come undone, just a little bit, just enough. And now, here we stood, on the side of the highway, staring at enough cocaine to send us to prison for the rest of our lives. Walter closed the trunk with shaking hands. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not in 43 years of marriage. It was the look of a man whose heart was completely broken. "What do we do?" he whispered. "Evelyn, what do we do?" I looked down the highway, in the direction Darnell's car had gone. They were probably 30 minutes ahead of us by now. Did they even realize we'd stopped? Were they waiting for us? Or were they expecting us to get caught? To take the fall for whatever nightmare they'd gotten themselves into? My son. My baby boy. The child I had rocked to sleep. The child I had nursed through every fever, every scraped knee, every broken heart. He had used us. He had turned us into criminals. My phone rang. Darnell's name flashed on the screen. Walter and I stared at it, watching it ring and ring. Finally, I answered. "Mama?" Darnell's voice was tight. "Where are you? You guys fall behind?" I couldn't speak. My throat was closed up with tears and rage and something I didn't even have a name for. "Mama? You there?" "I know what's in the bag, Darnell." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder. "Mama, don't do anything stupid. Just bring the bag to Birmingham like we planned. Nobody has to get hurt." "Nobody has to know anything. Nobody has to get hurt?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You put your father and me in danger. You made us into drug mules. We could go to prison for life. Did you even think about that? Did you even care?" "You said no!" Darnell shouted, and now the mask was completely off. "You said no to your own grandson. I had to find another way. This was the only option, and you were perfect for it. Nobody suspects old people. Nobody would have checked your car. You would have dropped off the bag. We would have had the money for Isaiah's school, and nobody would have been the wiser. But you couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Each word hit me like a physical blow. Walter grabbed the phone from my hand. "We're your parents, Darnell. How could you do this to us?" "Because you failed me," Darnell screamed. "My whole life, you never gave me what I needed when it mattered. And now, when I finally need you one last time, you're going to betray me? You're going to destroy your own son's life?" Walter's hand tightened around the phone. "You destroyed your own life, and you tried to destroy ours, too." "If you go to the police," Darnell said, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet, "you'll never see your grandchildren again. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell them their grandparents are the reason their daddy's in prison. I'll make sure they hate you. Is that what you want?" The line went dead. Walter and I stood there on the side of that highway, the sun beating down on us, semis roaring past and shaking our car with their wind. Two old people holding a phone and standing next to a trunk full of poison. "He's threatening us now," Walter said numbly. Our own son is threatening us." I looked at my husband, really looked at him, at the deep lines in his face, the gray in his hair, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of this betrayal. This was supposed to be our time. We were supposed to be enjoying our golden years. Instead, we were standing on a highway trying to decide whether to turn in our own child to the police. "What do we do?" Walter asked again. I thought about Amara and Isaiah. I thought about 25 years of sacrifice. I thought about every time I'd said yes when I should have said no. Every time I'd enabled him instead of letting him fall and learn to stand on his own. I thought about the life Walter and I could have had if we'd drawn boundaries earlier, the trips we could have taken, the peace we could have known, and I thought about right and wrong, about the kind of person I'd always tried to be, about the God I'd prayed to every single day of my life. I pulled out my phone again and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Walter put his hand over mine, steadying it. "My name is Evelyn Brooks," I said, my voice breaking, "and I need to report a crime." Chapter 2. The state trooper who arrived 20 minutes later was a young black woman named Officer Simmons. She couldn't have been more than 30 years old, and when she saw two elderly people standing beside their car on that lonely highway, her hand instinctively went to her weapon. "Sir, ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them." "Officer," I said, my voice shaking, "we're the ones who called. We're not the criminals here. Our son, he used us. He put drugs in our trunk without our knowledge." Officer Simmons' expression shifted from caution to something else. Something that looked almost like pity. "Open the trunk, please." Walter did. The black bag sat there like a coiled snake. Officer Simmons took one look inside and immediately called for backup. Within an hour, that empty stretch of highway was filled with police cars, their lights painting the pine trees red and blue. DEA agents arrived. A drug-sniffing dog confirmed what we already knew. We were separated and questioned, Walter in one patrol car, me in another. The agent interviewing me was an older white man named Detective Frank Morrison. He had kind eyes, but his questions were sharp. "Mrs. Brooks, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. And I need you to understand that your cooperation right now could be the difference between going home tonight and going to jail." So I told him. Everything. 25 years of enabling, the $55,000 request, the family trip that was supposed to heal our broken relationships, the bag that Darnell had asked us to transport. My voice broke more times than I could count, but I kept talking. When I finished, Detective Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his notebook and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "Mrs. Brooks, in my 28 years doing this job, I've seen a lot of things. But I've never seen anyone voluntarily turn in their own child, especially not when they could have just dumped that bag in a river and gone home like nothing happened. That took real courage." "I don't feel courageous," I whispered. "I feel like the worst mother in the world." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're a mother who finally chose to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing in the world. Your son is 43 years old, Mrs. Brooks. He made his choices. You're not responsible for them." They let us go that evening, but they kept our car for evidence. A female officer drove us to a motel about 20 miles back. As we sat in that small room with its thin walls and stale air conditioning, Walter and I held each other and cried like we hadn't cried since his mother passed away 15 years ago. "We did the right thing," Walter kept saying, over and over, like if he said it enough times it would stop hurting. We did the right thing. But it didn't stop hurting. Nothing could make this stop hurting. My phone had been ringing non-stop. Darnell, Keisha. Finally, I answered one of Keisha's calls. "How could you?" She was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. How could you do this to your own son, to your own grandchildren? The police just arrested Darnell at my cousin's house. They stormed in with guns, Evelyn, guns, in front of Amara and Isaiah. Those babies watched their father get dragged out in handcuffs because of you. Each word was a knife in my heart. Keisha, he used us. He turned us into criminals. He was willing to let us go to prison. He's their father. He's your son. And you threw him away like garbage. Don't you ever try to contact us again. Don't call. Don't text. You are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead. The line went dead. I dropped the phone and Walter caught me as my legs gave out. We took a Greyhound bus back to Atlanta the next morning. The ride took 6 hours, and every mile felt like a year. When we finally got home, the house felt different. Empty, like something vital had been drained out of it. The news spread fast through our community. By Sunday, everyone at Friendship Baptist Church knew. I saw it in their eyes as we walked through the doors. Some people looked at us with sympathy. Others looked away, uncomfortable. A few looked at us like we were the criminals, like we were the ones who had done something wrong. Pastor Williams found us after the service. He was 75, had been our pastor for 30 years, and had baptized all 3 of our children. Evelyn, Walter, I heard what happened. I want you to know that my door is always open, and I want you to know something else. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you saved that boy's soul. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their child face the consequences of their actions. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. My sister Francine came over that evening with a casserole and tears in her eyes. I know you don't want to hear this right now, but I'm proud of you. I know how much you love that boy, and I know how much this cost you. It cost me everything, I whispered. My son, my grandchildren. Everything. No, Francine said firmly. It cost you a relationship that was killing you. Evelyn, you and Walter have been prisoners for 25 years. Prisoners of Darnell's manipulation, his selfishness, his refusal to grow up. You just freed yourselves. It's going to hurt for a while, maybe for a long while. But you're free now. I didn't feel free. I felt destroyed. The next 2 months were the hardest of my life. Darnell was denied bail because of the amount of drugs involved and his connections to what the DEA called a significant trafficking operation. The news reported that the bust led to 17 other arrests. My son wasn't just dabbling in drugs. He was deep in the game. We hired a lawyer named Sharon Washington, a sharp black woman in her 50s who had a reputation for being tough but fair. She came to our house and laid out the situation. Darnell's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. The prosecution is building a strong case. They have the drugs, they have the connections, they have testimony from people he worked with who are trying to cut deals. But here's the thing. He's trying to drag you 2 down with him. What? Walter sat up straight. What do you mean? He's claiming you knew, that you were part of the operation, that you've been helping him transport drugs for years. He's willing to throw his own parents under the bus to try to reduce his sentence. I felt the room spin. My own son. My baby boy. He wasn't just using us. He was trying to destroy us. Can he do that? Walter asked. Can he actually make that stick? Not with the evidence we have, Sharon said. You called the police yourselves. You cooperated fully, and the DEA's investigation shows that you had no knowledge of Darnell's activities. But you need to be prepared. This is going to trial, and it's going to get ugly. He's going to say terrible things about you. Are you ready for that? I looked at Walter. He looked at me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than pain. I felt anger. Good, clean, righteous anger. Let him say whatever he wants, I said. We're telling the truth, and the truth is going to set us free. The trial began in March, 4 months after that day on the highway. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing building that had seen generations of Atlanta's legal battles. As Walter and I walked up those steps, holding hands, I saw Keisha standing with her mother near the entrance. She looked at me with such hatred that I nearly turned around and went home. But then I felt Walter's hand tighten around mine, and I remembered Pastor Williams's words. And I kept walking. The courtroom was packed. I saw people I knew from church, from the neighborhood. I saw Darnell's friends staring at us like we were traitors. And then they brought Darnell in, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, and my heart broke all over again. He looked at me once, just once, and the look in his eyes was pure hatred. The prosecutor, a young white woman named Ms. Chen, was thorough. She presented the evidence piece by piece, the drugs, the money trail, the testimony from Darnell's associates who had flipped on him to save themselves, and then she called me to the stand. Walking up to that witness box was one of the longest walks of my life. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. And then I did. I told the jury everything. About the 25 years of support, about the $55,000, about the family trip and the black bag, about the moment I saw what was inside and the decision to call 911. I cried on the stand. I couldn't help it. But I told the truth. Darnell's lawyer, a slick young man in an expensive suit, tried to make me look like a co-conspirator. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Brooks, that you and your husband had financial problems? That you were running out of retirement money?" "Yes," I said, "because we spent it all supporting our son." "And isn't it true that $55,000 would have solved a lot of your problems?" "The only problem we had," I said, looking directly at Darnell, "was that we loved our son too much to see what he really was." The lawyer tried to shake me, tried to poke holes in my story. But the truth is a powerful thing. And when you're telling the truth, there are no holes to poke. Walter testified next, and he was even stronger than I was. He looked at that jury and said, "I worked an honest job for 35 years. My wife worked an honest job for 28 years. We raised our children to know right from wrong. We never asked for anything but to be respected and loved. And our son betrayed that. He betrayed us. He tried to make us criminals. And when we refused to let that happen, he tried to destroy us. That's not a son. That's a stranger." When Darnell took the stand in his own defense, he tried to paint himself as a desperate father doing whatever it took to help his son. He cried. He talked about how hard it was to live up to his parents' expectations. He even suggested that we had known about the drugs all along and were only claiming ignorance to save ourselves. But the jury saw through it. I could see it in their faces. They saw a 43-year-old man who had never taken responsibility for anything in his life. The verdict came back after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Darnell was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. As they let him out of the courtroom, he looked at me one last time, and he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I hope you're happy, Mama. I hope destroying your own son was worth it." I stood up. Walter tried to pull me back down, but I shook him off. I looked my son in the eye and said, "I didn't destroy you, Darnell. You destroyed yourself. And I pray to God that one day you'll understand that." He turned away. And that was the last time I saw my son. The aftermath was strange. It was like waking up from a long nightmare and not quite believing you're awake. Walter and I went home to our quiet house, and for the first time in 25 years, the phone didn't ring with requests for money. The doorbell didn't chime with demands for help. It was peaceful, and terrifying, and liberating. Pastor Williams started a prayer circle for us at church. Sister Margaret, who ran the women's ministry, invited me to join a grief support group. "Losing a child to prison is still losing a child," she said gently. "You're allowed to grieve." And I did grieve. I grieved for the little boy Darnell had been. I grieved for the man he could have become. I grieved for the relationship we would never have, but I didn't grieve for the decision I made, because that decision saved my life. 6 months after the trial, something unexpected happened. A lawyer contacted us about a victims' compensation fund. Because we had been victims of Darnell's crime, we were entitled to recover some of the money we had given him over the years. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to rebuild our retirement account. Enough to dream again. Walter and I sat at our kitchen table, looking at the check, and we started to laugh. It was the first time we'd really laughed in almost a year. "You know what I want to do?" Walter said. "I want to take that trip to Hawaii we always talked about. I want to stand on a beach with you and watch the sunset, and not worry about anyone but us." "That sounds like heaven," I whispered. We went to Hawaii that fall. We stood on the beach at Waikiki and watched the sun sink into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Walter held my hand, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 25 years. Peace. 1 year after the trial, we received a letter. It was from Amara, our granddaughter. She was 14 now, almost grown. "Dear Grandma and Grandpa," it said. "I've been wanting to write this for a long time, but I was scared. Mom said I wasn't allowed to talk to you, but I'm old enough now to make my own choices. I want you to know that I don't hate you. I was angry at first. I didn't understand. But my school counselor helped me understand that sometimes love means doing the hard thing. Sometimes love means saying no. I miss you, and when I turn 18, I want to see you again. If you'll have me, love, Amara." I cried so hard reading that letter that Walter had to take it from my hands to finish reading it himself. Then he cried too. We wrote back immediately. We told her we loved her. We told her we would wait as long as it took. We told her that our door would always be open. 3 months later, we got a similar letter from Isaiah. And that's when we knew. We had lost our son. But we hadn't lost everything. Some things could be redeemed. Today, Walter and I are doing better than we've done in decades. We volunteer at church. We take trips. We spend time with our daughters and their families. We've started really living our lives instead of just surviving them. Sometimes people ask me if I regret turning in my son, if I could go back and make a different choice. And I tell them the truth. I regret that it came to that. I regret that I didn't set boundaries earlier. I regret that I enabled him for so long that he thought he could get away with anything. But I don't regret doing the right thing. I don't regret choosing truth over loyalty to a lie. I don't regret saving myself and my husband. Because here's what I learned. Love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's bad choices. Love doesn't mean letting someone drag you down into darkness because you're afraid of the light. Real love, true love, sometimes means letting go. It means letting someone face the consequences of their actions so they have a chance, even a small chance, of becoming the person they were meant to be. I don't know if Darnell will ever change. I don't know if he'll ever take responsibility for what he did. I don't know if I'll ever hear from him again, but I know this. I'm free. Walter is free. And after 72 years on this earth, I finally understand what it means to live with dignity and peace. Next month, Amara turns 18. She called us last week and asked if she could come visit. She wants to bring Isaiah. She wants to hear our side of the story. She wants to rebuild what was broken. And we're ready, because that's what redemption looks like. Not in the people who hurt us changing, but in us choosing to keep our hearts open to the ones who want to find their way back. I think about that day on the highway sometimes. The moment I saw what was in that bag and made the choice to call 911. In that moment, I chose freedom over fear, truth over comfort, my own dignity over someone else's manipulation. It was the hardest choice I ever made, and it was the best choice I ever made. To anyone listening who's been enabling someone they love, who's been sacrificing themselves for someone who won't help themselves. I want you to hear me. It's not selfish to choose yourself. It's not cruel to set boundaries. It's not hateful to let someone face the consequences of their actions. It's love. Real love. The kind that heals instead of harms. The kind that frees instead of imprisons. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop the car and face the truth, no matter how devastating it is. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.